Welcome to the Business Insider Podcast, where we interview the top business leaders in their respective industries. Hey, what's going on, guys? Today I'm excited to introduce a special VIP guest. We've got Ben Hopsicker here. He is the Director of Rehabilitative Medicine and Community Education at a practice called Chronic Care of Richmond, and they specialize in chronic pain and weight management. Ben, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Absolutely. Very glad you can make it as well. So as you know, I've got a bunch of questions lined up for you, and I'm sure our audience is wondering, specifically what you guys do and really what the major outcomes are for your clients and customers that come to your practice. So before the podcast, you'd kind of given me a brief rundown on what that looked like. If you wouldn't mind reiterating that to the audience, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, the vast majority of the work that we do is helping people who are dealing with chronic health conditions that are leading to progressively worsening outcomes for them. The thing that I do the most work with directly is managing chronic pain. People who are getting repetitively re-injured, people who have pain that no matter what they're working with, it doesn't seem to be getting better. And then we also work with patients who, on the opposite end, from a lifestyle perspective, are having a negative outcome as it relates to their weight, whatever those bad decisions are, you're gaining weight or you're not able to lose weight. We also help patients be able to manage that.
That's awesome, man. Now, if you had to define your superpower or the unique skill or insight that really sets you apart in your space, what would it be and how has it shaped your success?
That's such a great question. I think probably the thing that I would consider a superpower is my ability to help patients understand the consistency equals outcomes, right? Especially as it relates to healthcare, the nature of what so much of us have as an understanding of how healthcare works is, so I wait until something goes wrong. I go see my doctor. He says, take 2 of these and call me in the morning, and that's it. That's not how healthcare works. And my primary superpower is helping to change patients' understanding of what healthcare really is and what that means as it relates to getting a sustainable outcome.
So let's talk about that for a little bit. Preventative care versus sick care. Why? Why do we care?
It is the crux of what I consider to be the driver of the biggest part of the process of the healthcare crisis in America. So much of our behavior as it relates to our day-over-day function operates under the assumption that healthcare is free, right? We eat terribly. We put poisons into our body as it relates to nutrition on a day in and day out basis. We don't exercise. We don't move. We don't focus on good sleep. We don't focus on good mental health. And the net result of that over time is a progressive series of, in a lot of circumstances, preventable health problems. My biggest concern as it relates to the function of healthcare is that if you're waiting until something is already broken, at that point, the damage has been done. And while that analogy sometimes works with a car, and maybe you put off the routine maintenance on your car, you only get one body. And the more you stall out on having good behaviors as it relates to your health, the greater the negative long-term outcome will be. Everything that we do at Chronic Care of Richmond is trying to help change that paradigm and get you thinking more in terms of preventing illness. And if you're already breaking down, what can we do to try and reset the clock back a little bit so you're feeling better?
Yeah, absolutely. No, you explained that perfectly. So I'm curious, what kind of inspired you to pursue your current path, Ben? How'd you get here?
I've been working as a chiropractor and rehabilitative exercise specialist for 15 years now. I joined Chronic Care of Richmond just a hair over 2 years ago, specifically because of the integrated approach that we have in relationship to regenerative medicine, chiropractic care, rehabilitative exercise, and nutrition with weight management. 4 years ago, you wouldn't know it necessarily to look at me, but 4 years ago, I weighed 320 pounds.
Wow.
And in the
Yeah, I would
process
not
of
know that.
Yeah, I worked on my nutrition first, lost like 115 pounds on the type of program that we do here. And then because I started feeling so much better, everything in my life improved. I started exercising more. I started lifting weights more. And now I'm in a positive feedback loop, right? Everything feels better. So I joined this practice specifically because I saw how much benefit it had in my life. And I was already working with patients who were dealing with chronic pain, but I saw how much better I feel, and I knew this is where I needed to be.
Dude, I love that success story, man. Yeah, I could definitely relate to you in that sense where, having Lyme disease, I've kind of had to go through the devastating parts of healthcare, several years before I even found out what I had, many years just being sick, laying in bed, not
That's
knowing what's
awesome.
going wrong. And, finally, once I kind of discovered preventative care and private practice and how amazing it is, I credit a lot of my, success to what you guys have been able to help me do. Yeah, dude, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of healthcare, but it is disgusting to say the least, man.
And what really is particularly bad about that is I think if you have a conversation like this with just about any healthcare provider, pretty much universally across the board, nobody's happy in that paradigm. I don't know any healthcare providers who are gratified to not be able to take the time with the patients that they want to.
Yeah.
I mean, every primary care provider, every orthopedist, every neurologist that I've ever had these conversations with all feels the same way. And I don't think when you're in medical school and you're learning to do this, you don't wake up in the morning and say, the reason that I want to go to work is because I want to be beholden to the insurance companies and be pigeonholed into providing the least common denominator of care. That's not what any of us dreamed about as kids, but it becomes the reality. And all the more reason why, as a patient, you need to take responsibility for your healthcare upon yourself, and you need to start developing behaviors and habits that prevent the need as much as you reasonably can for that more acute care. I got hit by a car. I literally got run over, broke my neck in 3 places, and had terrible nerve damage into my arm. You can't stop the lightning bolts. Sometimes they happen. But when it comes to preventing injury as much as you can, that's key. Your history with Lyme disease is brutal. It's not like you went out and said, boy, I hope I get bit by a tick. I'm glad to hear you're doing better, I hope.
Yeah, I'm doing better. I still
Good.
have it. It's an ongoing process.
It's a
Lyme's just
battle.
really weird because, like, some people, they go their whole lives and never even know they have it. Some people are devastatingly sick forever, can't ever get better. And I'm kind of in that weird zone where it's like, I can't get rid of it currently, but I can get better. So it's really weird. But yeah, man.
Typically speaking, with something like Lyme disease, that's going to be the case. It almost, if you catch it super early, you can resolve it in a lot of circumstances, but you went a couple years without diagnosis.
Don't know. I don't even know how long I had it for. I started noticing symptoms when I was probably 12. Didn't catch it until 19. So I
That's
have
tough.
no idea how long I had it for, to be honest.
Sorry to hear that. Well, I'm glad you're working towards getting better. It's not going to happen by accident. It's going to take sustained work. You got to just,
Yeah.
Have the behaviors that help to support what you can control in your health. You can't stop the lightning bolts, but you can have good sustainable behaviors that allow you to function at your best within that limited function.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, that's what I try to do. And that's kind of where I am today is like, why I do this podcast because, I want to talk about health and wellness and help other people to, find the right providers, find the right care because it took a long time for me to understand how preventive care works. I mean, they make it as tricky as possible to really understand and learn how that works. And once you do, you don't go back. I mean, I'm sure you can say the same thing losing 115 pounds. It's like, no one really, they always say, oh, you need to lose weight, but it's not, you don't really understand at the core how different your life is or, here's a magic pill to lose weight. So you don't need to do all that. It's like, get the diet dialed in and that in itself takes care of a lot of it. Even for Lyme disease, just getting my diet right helped a lot.
It's huge. It's anything where you're having like a systemic autoimmune response. Nutrition is pretty much universally going to be one of the most important things you can do to regulate it. As it relates to preventable disease in the United States in particular, we live in a shockingly obesogenic society. Everything about our culture engenders making reactive decisions on nutrition that frequently do not support being healthy. In fact, it brings you in the other direction. So it takes much more work and effort to be aware of what is required to help your body be able to be healthy. But as you fuel yourself appropriately, you're going to get the outcomes. The analogy I always use as it relates to food is literally the fuel that our body runs on. And if you are a diesel engine and you're putting rocket fuel in a diesel engine, the net result is you're going to blow out at the seams, you're going to have too much heat, and you're going to have problems.
Right.
From a chemistry perspective, that's not a inappropriate analogy. It's very close to that. And a lot of what we put in our body has us burning so hot and fuels that process of chronic inflammatory load so much, you end up in a state of perpetual disease. There are things that you can't control for. There are genetically heritable factors that you can't control for. There's a lot of things that can limit you. But the biggest limiter is when you are also having behaviors that you can control that are adding tremendous fuel to the fire of that damage.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in a rapidly changing world, where do you kind of see your industry going over the next 5 to 10 years?
I very sincerely hope that all of healthcare is moving more towards preventative care and education as it relates to healthcare, right? In the United States, how likely do I see that as happening? Not as likely as in a lot of other developing nations. I think the probably the most important method, and one of the things that's super great, is podcasts like this exist, education platforms exist. We are getting progressively more and more savvy as a culture as it relates to an ounce of prevention is in fact literally worth a pound of cure. And more people are at least becoming aware of the impact that their behaviors have on their health. Um, Simultaneously, I see the need for the nature of the work that I do from a chronic pain management perspective becoming significantly more necessary, right? As we collectively, as a society, don't address the fundamental problems that bring people into my office, the need for the services that I offer are getting more and more in demand every day. It's nice for me to be in a position of relative job security, but in my best case scenario, we're a healthy society and I'm needed significantly less.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, what do you feel like is the number one biggest problem in your industry, and really, what are you guys doing to solve for that?
Helping people to understand how important their day over day behaviors really are for healthcare, trying to get away from the paradigm of take two of these and call me in the morning, right? That's not viable it is for some things, right? There are definitely pharmaceuticals have their place. We don't do anything as it relates to drugs and surgery as a practice. That's not what we do. They have their place in medicine, and it would be foolish of me to say that they don't. There's definitely a ton of reasons why life-saving interventions, things like insulin for diabetics, right? There's a lot of examples where that makes sense, particularly as it relates to chronic pain. My problem inherent to a lot of chronic pain management is you're really not able to address the underlying root cause of that problem. And the objective with everything that we're doing is to try to control as much as is humanly possible the cause of that pain rather than the reaction of that pain. And we see that becoming more and more popular every day. Patients are making more and more choices about what can I do to support my body healing and recovering rather than band-aiding over those symptoms.
So, what advice would you give to someone, out there in the audience that, is dealing with inflammatory issues, maybe is overweight, or literally maybe they're not experiencing anything yet, but they kind of want to get the jump on preventive care?
Oh, I mean, literally my dream audience is the person who is not already in significant chronic pain. By the time pain usually, especially as it relates to things like joint pain and osteoarthritis, by the time that shows up and is now starting to significantly limit your quality of life, there's been a degree of damage done that you just have to work with, right? I don't expect full, complete back to feeling like you're 20 years old for a patient who's been destroying their body aggressively for 60 years, right? We can get much better. Best case scenario is recognizing in everybody. I wish I could rewind the clock to myself when I was a teenager and say that your day over day behaviors are going to shape the outcome of your health. The ideal circumstance is for people to start becoming aware at a young age how important those daily behaviors are from, the fundamentals of health. What are my sleep habits? How's my hydration? How's my nutrition in relationship to chronic inflammatory loads, specifically things like high density sugars, trans fats, fried foods, etc.? How's my mental health? Do I work on that on a regular basis? That's a very important component of the process.
People skip
It's
over that a lot. It's all connected.
100%. It's there is no one part of your health that is not directly connected to the rest, right? People who have outstanding mental health don't typically get stuck in a circumstance where they're making repetitive day over day bad decisions as it relates to lifestyle. People who are having good mental health recognize the importance of trying to take those behaviors. I got to a point where I was very unhealthy and in a lot of chronic pain, significantly in part because I did not have good mental health habits. In fact, I started recognizing that during the pandemic when COVID was happening, because very specifically, my mood was catastrophically bad. I was severely depressed. And in working first on my mental health, Then I had much more motivation to start working on my nutritional health, which helped me to lose a ton of weight, which then in turn made me want to work even more on my physical health. And as I started getting into that positive feedback loop,
Yep.
my nutrition got better. Suddenly my capacity to work on my mental health improved. Suddenly my capacity to want to work on my physical health improved. So many people who I work with and so many people who I treat, especially in chronic pain, depression is a major factor associated with that. And while I am not a mental health specialist, I regularly make referrals out in our community to mental health specialists to help work on that, specifically
Yeah.
because it is a key component to being able to be sustainably healthy, right? The biggest benefit there is identifying why I have the behaviors, and equally important, why I value myself enough to start making those behavioral changes that are going to be sustainable. I work a lot on sustainability. That's a big part of what I teach. Focus on your motivation, focus on understanding why do I want to work on improving my health so I can feel better, because you're going to have a finite amount of motivation. I don't wake up every morning jazzed to go to the gym, right? There are days where I'm like, man, I just want to sit on the couch and watch some football and eat some chicken wings and be happy. But I recognize in myself that when I make a decision that's going to support my greater health overall, I feel a heck of a lot better. And it makes me appreciate the football in the afternoon that much more when I put the work
Yep.
in the morning.
That's such a good way to explain it, and that's something I've had to teach myself as well. And I tell every person I know, it's like when you make that small decision, even if you don't think about it at the time, your brain, you're disrespecting yourself, and that adds up over time. It's like used to have a little bit of a vaping problem a couple years ago, and it's like very hard to quit nicotine, very
Yes, it
difficult.
is. I was a
Still dealing
smoker.
with
I remember.
yeah, and it's like every time you cave in and you hit the vape or you hit the cigarette, it feels good in that 2 minute stretch. And then after that, you just remember, like, oh my God, why did I freaking do that? And then you feel bad about yourself. And,
Yeah,
it just keeps snowballing.
it's tough.
Definitely still something I deal with. But yeah, that's just a great example. Like, it really, always makes you feel worse when you know you shouldn't be doing it. You do it, and then you're like, fuck, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. At some point, you have to give yourself some grace, right? There is a degree of recognizing that all of us are not perfect beings. The other thing that you have to remember is that your brain is extremely conditioned to reward behaviors that which it perceives to be a positive
Yes.
thing. And while certainly using a vape pen and inhaling nicotine is not good for you, you can logically recognize that. Neurologically, the addictive centers of your brain don't give a flying you know what, whether it's good for you or not. It's the same thing with eating sugar, right? Eating sugar, eating high fructose corn syrup is not a natural experience for the human body, but the process of absorbing that concentration of energy triggers the pleasure center of your brain at an exceptionally high level because we're mammals. We don't know where our next meal is coming from. So when you do that, you're basically telling your body, great, I'm thriving in my environment. So it gets addicting, and it's extremely difficult to change those behaviors. Having a mindset that allows you to stay focused on your goals to help you battle that highly addictive chemistry is a very important part of the process. And for many of our patients, having somebody there to help you understand that at a higher level. I listen to all of my patients and definitely try and help people stay focused on their present time goals and focused on why they want to make those changes. But if you need to work with a mental health specialist, it's an incredibly valuable part of the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben, for any of our viewers out there, that are in the Richmond area and, do want to come see what you guys are doing and get some assistance, what would be the best way for them to reach out to you guys?
Our website, Chronic Care of Richmond, is definitely going to be the best way to find us. Find us online. We regularly have in-house education seminars where we talk about the natures of the services that we offer, both in terms of managing chronic pain and peripheral neuropathy. Peripheral neuropathy is another sort of area that we specialize in managing, particularly because of the chronic inflammatory nature of that type of progressive change. We do phenomenal work with helping people recover and prevent future damage with that. And we do regular seminars as it relates to the nature of what we do from a weight management perspective. We regularly have community engagement. In fact, actually not in the Richmond area, but next week, Thursday, we're going to be in Charlottesville doing a seminar on that as well. So find us on our website. We regularly have in-house education. If it's something where you're definitely interested in, definitely you can sign up for an initial exam with us and consultation with us. I try and tell everybody I'm not in the business of trying to pound square pegs into round holes, right? The nature of what I do is not going to be for everybody, but for patients who are struggling with chronic pain and chronic dysfunction, in a lot of ways, we can significantly improve quality of life.
So Ben, well, guys, I'm going to link all of their stuff in the description. So definitely go check out what they're up to. And Ben, thank you so much for coming on the
Yeah,
podcast today.
appreciate you.
It was a pleasure interviewing you and learning about what you guys do.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you, Riley.